Welcome to another edition of Life Journey. I'm Dr. Ralph Smith. You know, one of the programs that I really love, and it's my most enjoyable program I do because, in my life, I deal with my own personal issues. I have a company to run. I've got patients to take care of. It's a lot of stress, to be honest with you, even though I try not to show it. But the thing that I enjoy the most is when people participate in this program, even though it's from afar, and they send us either email or text messages wanting questions answered. And it really makes me feel like I'm reaching through that camera lens and actually touching you. And in the future, when we have these programs, hopefully we'll have shows where you can sit in an audience or actually participate, and then we can have that personal connection. But absence of that, let's go ahead and hit some of these questions today. And I want you to think about these questions, and once again, I always remind you of this, that at the end of each of the programs that we do, there will be a closing billboard that'll list our website address and our email. Don't hesitate to use that. And of course, it's a free resource. We won't even send you a bill. Well, let's go ahead and deal with the first question. The first question deals with, how do I know when I'm done with counseling? Well, that's a simple question, but it's a complex answer. It's a combination of events. First of all, if you deal with counseling, that means you recognize there's a need for help, you're willing to listen to help, and you're looking for answers. And that's the kind of criteria that I use as a doctor to help people. So the issue of when counseling is over is a combination of two things. Number one, that you feel better, and the way we do this about feeling better is you feel stronger in life to go forward in your life than when you first came through the door of a Journey Freud Wellness Center. So we'll talk about all the issues that you have, we'll talk about solutions, and I generally will tell, and it's just after many, many years of experience, that when you stop asking me questions, I know we're done. And I'll look you straight in the eye and I'll say, does this answer all your questions? And generally, if they're done, they'll say yes. And I'll say, well, don't forget, if you happen to hit a dip in the road, you know my phone number. And then we normally have a firm handshake or a big hug, and we know we're done. The issue of when you're completing counseling is not based on results. It's based on you getting the answers you need for the reason why you came and had counseling. All right, the second question. How do I know if I need counseling? That is a much easier question, and the way that works is this. Let's say you're dealing with a complex life issue. Let's say it's a relationship with your parents, and let's picture you being a 16-year-old, a young man or a young woman, and you just don't, no matter what you do, you cannot get this resolution into the problem. And by resolution, I mean to where your folks are listening, and you're responding, and you reach some type of understanding. So if you're having a problem dealing with your parents in this hypothetical example, and you've tried everything you can to communicate, then what you do is you come to anyone that is professionally trained and you say, look, I have this problem dealing with my parents. They don't listen to me, or they want me to come in early at night, or they don't trust me, or they don't like my friends. All these basic questions. You write them down, you bring them into a counseling session, and then you sit down with your therapist or your counselor and you have that discussion. Now, there's something I need to include here as kind of like the crown jewel of this issue. First of all, for whatever reason, when the Lord developed us and brought us into the world, it is almost impossible, unless you're specially trained, to be able to listen, to talk, and to formulate thought. To do three of those human functions, unless you're professionally trained, it's almost impossible. And that's especially true when you get into arguments. It always tickles me when I do marital counseling that a husband and wife are yelling at each other and everything, and I just sit there and watch it as an observer, and then when they're done or they need to take a breath, I'll say, okay, I want you to stop right now, and I'll go to the husband. I'll say, sir, husband, Tom, whatever your name might be, what did your wife just say? And guess what? He can't say it. And I'll do the same thing to her. And I'll say, folks, this is the first problem you have to solve, is that when you're discussing an issue, let the other person explain their view, don't interrupt them, have a little notepad close by where you can write it down, and let them finish their thought. And then when it's your turn to respond, you'll be given that same respect and trust. That's the way you solve problems. If you're yelling at each other, you're not going to retain it, and you're not going to solve problems. And the other crown jewel to that, so that it tells you why you need counseling, don't bring up the past. The past is something we learn from, and hopefully we don't make the same mistakes. But when you start going into an argument or in a counseling session, and you keep bringing up the past all the time, it just proves you're really not listening. Let's take another question. When dealing with addiction, what can I do if someone refuses help? When you're dealing with addictions, you need to first of all realize that the problem is the person that's dealing with those addictions. Addiction, what we call addictive behavior, is very, very tough to manage. It could be addiction to behavior patterns of being the boss, being insecure, wanting to tell everybody what you think. It could be drug, it could be alcohol, or whatever the case might be. But the big problem that you have in dealing with addictions and trying to help somebody is you ask one basic question. And you don't need a PhD to answer or ask this question. You simply ask this question: do you really want my help, and will you listen to me? If you'll use that one series of questions there in that one sentence, and if they say yes, then you can help them with their addiction. If they say no, or they deny that they have an addiction, which is very common, because denial is basically one of the first elements in battling addiction, then you say, well, look, I'm there for you. And you give them a hug, or you pat them on the shoulder, and you let them come to you. That's the answer to that question. What do I do, or what do I look for in a counselor? You know, you need to look for honesty. You got to get the feeling when you look for a person to fill that role that they're really invested with you. In other words, the way you can tell that, are they asking you a lot of questions and what we call charting you, or are they just reacting to everything you say? Because if they're reacting to everything you say, they're really not invested. So if you're in a typical session, what you want to do is you want to say to the therapist or the doctor or the counselor, you say, look, I have issues with keeping focus in my life. I don't have focus in my life. I try to react to everything I do. My wife doesn't trust me because I'm not reliable. These are the issues I have. Do you have any suggestions for that? And a good therapist, a good counselor, a good doctor will say, okay, let's take one issue at a time. And they'll talk about the cause of the issue. They'll give you some potential solutions. And they should always finish it by saying, are any of these solutions good for you? Are these the type of things you could do? Or how else can we solve this problem? And the final measure of a good counselor that you look for, therapist or doctor, is you make sure they give you solutions, not Band-Aids. As you watch this program, and you'll get to the point it'll drive you nuts, I would guess. You're going to hear me say a lot. Is this a solution, or is this a Band-Aid? A Band-Aid is a temporary cure. It's like getting a cut, putting a Band-Aid on it, covering it up, you pretend it's not there, and all of a sudden that Band-Aid falls off, and the cut's disappeared, it's gone. Life was that simple, you wouldn't need people like me, or people in this field. So you don't use Band-Aids, you look for solutions. And the only way you can find a solution is to explain the problem, how the problem came into existence, what you've tried to do to solve the problem, and then a fix that makes it go away. Those are 4 elements that have to be followed. If your therapist or your counselor or your doctor's not doing it, you're wasting your time and you're wasting your money. Next question. What do I do if I have a spouse or friend suffering from an addiction? That's a very complex question. It's hard to answer in a short term. So let me kind of give you some criteria to work with. First of all, and I need you to really think hard about this, does that spouse or friend truly trust you? Are they willing to listen to you? Are they looking just to get sympathy or compassion? And you know, there's nothing wrong with that, but that's what we call playing a victim. And it's okay if you want to have some compassion to play victim, but sooner or later you have to step over that line and become a person who wants to solve their problems. So the first step you have to do with this hypothetical friend or spouse is say, look, do you really want a solution? Do you want me just to give you warmth and love and tell you that things will be better? And that's what I refer to as feel-good therapy. Or do you really want to solve this problem? If they give you the indication they just want to feel good and feel warm with their situation they're facing, then what you're going to do is you're going to drop your therapist hat off and you're just going to give a lot of love and compassion and do a lot of listening. And what's a lot of listening? That means you're spending 90% of your time listening and 10% of your time getting advice. Now, on the other hand, if they really want you to solve a problem and they want to listen to your solutions, you give them your solutions based on your life experiences, and then you remind them before you finish talking to them, you remind them, say, look, these are just ideas that I've used in my life. These are things that I've learned from therapy sessions I've gone to, but I want you to know something. Regardless whether you want to use this help or not, I'm there for you. You do not have to do this alone. And for folks who have challenges, whether it's raising kids, addictions, bad marriages, as long as they know that you love them and you care about them and that they're not going to be alone, you will help them. And the way you measure that is when you first sat down to have the conversation, how did they feel? And what happened when you were done with the conversation? they feel better, you've done well. Next question. Can my marriage be saved? Somewhat along the same lines about addictions, believe it or not. A marriage has a lot to do with what do folks do when they fall in love. Is it lust? Is it sexual attraction? Is it the need that you can do things that you like together? Whatever the means were that brought you together to decide to have a marriage. It seems, and this may seem ironic if you hear me explain it, but life can change sometimes when you get married versus when you're dating or in that courtship phase. And if you've got a marriage in trouble, you really need to go back to the beginning of the relationship. And usually you start with expectations. And when you marry somebody and you're in the first year of that marriage, a lot of folks do premarital counseling. We do that, and I think it's a good idea. 40% of the people don't survive that premarital counseling because we bring up issues that they never talked about. Like, for example, how do you raise kids? Who's going to manage the money? Do you have religious differences? How are the in-laws going to be treated? Those are killer questions. And when you're in love and you've got this feeling of attraction and all this, you don't think about those things. But when you go to premarital counseling, you have to do that. Now, the question was, how do marriages get saved? Well, the way to get saved is, first of all, both people have to realize there's a problem. That's number one. Both people have to realize that they want to solve the problem, that it's not a matter they're just unhappy and trying to find an excuse to get out of the relationship. They really want to solve the problem. And number three, they have to lower their expectations. They've got to make sure that talking as a couple with the help of a professional advisor, that their expectations are reasonable and they can be obtainable. It's a lot of therapy, and they call it psycho-talk, but it's a lot of therapy that you create levels of success so that you're enjoying the successes step by step by step. It's not like playing baseball and you've got the bases loaded and the only way you're going to win the game is hitting a home run. Life's not like that. You don't need to hit home runs. You need to get some singles. And if you get enough singles, you're going to have a runner cross the plate and you're going to win the ball game. Life is a lot like that. So make sure the expectations are there. And then the last element of it, which is very critical, is be honest with each other. Stop trying to be someone you're not. It amazes me that when people ask the question about how a marriage can be saved, what the question should have been asked is long before they actually got involved in a serious relationship. Are we good for each other? And am I the type of person that you want? So if you present a different type of person to folks when you're going through the courtship, and they fall madly in love with you, and then you get married and you revert back to your regular behavior or your regular personality, everybody says, well, boy, we got married, everything went to hell in a handbasket. Well, not necessarily. You painted a picture perhaps of yourself that really wasn't you. And then when you relax in a relationship, you get comfortable in the relationship, you start taking people for granted in the relationship, then all of a sudden that Prince Charming becomes somebody totally different. So yes, a marriage can be saved if you're willing to talk with each other and you both want to save it. If not, and if you have children involved especially, then get in some intense therapy to see if it can be saved. Next question. How long does counseling typically take? It has a lot to do with the subjects at hand. Counseling can be a matter of a course correction. We do those all the time, where people have a few minor issues, nothing that's threatening a relationship, and all they need is some direction or some goals. And in that particular case, you can be completed with a therapy or a counseling session, we call session, 2 or 3 sessions, and you'll be good to go. If the problems are more complex, it takes a longer time. And you want to make sure you finalize the financial cost involved in that, and that the therapist is not using you as a taxi cab driver would and driving you in a long route to be able to build the meter. But you've got to make sure that financially and time-wise you can make the commitment. And a good counselor should do an assessment or an evaluation for you and then be able to come back to you and answer that question of how long it'll take. That's a very good question. Next question. What do I need to know about counseling for my children? That question is hard to answer because of a couple reasons, but let's hit all 3 points. And by 3 points, children and how they grow up is broken down into 3 different time segments. The first time segment is what we call pre-education, which is 0 to 5. And yes, 0 is a number that we use because even young babies, if they don't like noise, it's very important that if you're arguing or you're creating a lot of noise, it scares babies. And I'm talking about ages from 6 months to a year. So it's very important that you keep your voices down and that the child does not get frightened. Now, once they enter kindergarten, and I'm not talking about preschool, but once they enter kindergarten, Then they've got to learn how to adapt their personalities to a new boss, and by boss I mean the teacher, not their parents, and all these children that all want attention. And you got 20 kids in that class, in kindergarten class, and there's only one teacher. And they have to learn how to take their social attitudes. And by social attitudes, I mean the attitudes about behaving, not talking unless you raise your hand. All these behaviors they don't have to do at home. So that's what we call the pre-education stage. The education stage is when they start developing before puberty, which generally hits between ages 11 and 13, to where ages, let's say 5 to 12, just to round off numbers, where they're trying to have relationships, they're trying to go to school, they're trying to get good grades. They really don't want parents around, but then again, they need parents for reinforcement. The children in that age group are very confused. And if you throw in another element of a divorce or a separation of committed relationship or financial issues, it puts so much pressure and stress on those kids, they'll act out. And when kids act out, you've got some huge problems. So let's assume you're a fortunate one and they're not acting out. You just need to listen more than telling them what to do. And as they get older, that's a key skill to learn. And then finally, the part that makes it the toughest for children, and I'm going to consider a child anybody under the age of 18, is puberty. Oh my gosh. When you talk about puberty, you've got a medical influence of the development of their hormones, and they'll have this wonderful rush of emotions where they love you all the time as a mom and a dad, and then the next day they wake up and you're the worst enemy in the world. And how do you become the worst enemy in the world? When you use the word no. Oh my goodness. Kids in puberty, when they hear the word no, it's like lighting a fuse to a bomb. It's that serious. So what you have to do in that case is slowly get the child, whether they're 13 or 14, whatever, and they just evidently, they sooner or later they come out of puberty. And I laugh because I'm thinking back to the memories of our 3 children that Linda and I raised. But as they move out of the maturity angle of getting out of puberty and moving to adulthood, then as a parent, you have the toughest element. And the toughest element of that, for that type of counseling, is to all of a sudden advise and not consent. And hopefully you prepare your kids for childhood and you prepare your kids for adulthood so they can make the natural progression and be good role models for their families. It's very complex though. It's not as easy as it sounds. Next question. How can just talking help solve a situation? I'm going to address that question in the form that a non-professional is involved in getting help. This would be a theoretical example of a good friend that you work with and they're having trouble in their marriage and they want to talk about it. When people are talking about problems, and even though they want to keep it confidential, they're really looking for sympathy, they're looking for compassion, they're looking for you, yeah, I went through that stage when I got married in my 20s. They're looking for support. A lot of times they'll do it based on they like you, you have the same opinions in life. There's something that will bond you to this friend who's trying to help you. But more importantly, you want to share this with a friend who will not tell anybody else, because if you violate that trust, you will burn the friendship. I want to underline that again. When you share something with a friend and you're trying to help them, you do not talk about it with anybody else because you'll burn a relationship. But it's a person that wants to hear your opinion. You do not play the role of a Dr. Phil again and say, well, I'm glad you asked me that question. This is what you have to do. If you do that, you're going to put them on the defensive and they'll stop listening to you. So once again, remember that when you help a friend, it's a two-way street. You're there to support, provide emotional comfort, provide advice, but you're largely there to listen. And you'll know when that friendship is right because the friend will say, well, what if I did this or what if I did that? And then they're telling you they trust you and respect you. And then you give them your honest opinion. Don't guess on those things. There's a lot at stake. Our next question. As a young person in Clallam County, how can I become a future therapist? Again, an excellent question. First of all, you need to get some education. Realize that how deep you go into therapy or counseling or whatever the case might be can vary from going to school and getting a bachelor's degree in social work and become a social worker. And those people serve a very valuable role. Usually it's a government function as a social worker where they go into families, they try to resolve issues, they try to obviously protect the children. That's why Child Protective Services is so important. And you're able to go in there with the knowledge of a bachelor's degree, which teaches you concepts, but perhaps more important, you get real life skills to be able to teach you how you deal with these situations through just having boots on the ground. That's basically the best way to put it. If you decide you want this to become an occupation and you want to do this as life's works, then you have to figure the investment and the time to go on and get at least a master's degree or a doctorate. And a master's degree can take you anywhere from 2 to 3 years. And a doctorate, based on where you go, you can add another 3 years on top of that. So if you seriously want to become a doctor, and you say you have rich folks that can pay all the bills so you don't have to work, so you can count on, once you get out of high school, to spend anywhere from let's say 8 to 10 years of getting your doctorate. And then when you get your doctorate, you have a form of internship where you go to work with other agencies, and you can pick your discipline, whether you're dealing with abused women, let's say substance abuse, family counseling, or being a generalist, which is what I do. I'm a generalist. So those are neat things. It's a good occupation, but let me assure you, you're not going to get rich. There's going to be a lot of lean years before you start making the real money. So if you're willing to do that, and you truly have love in your heart, you want to help people, then you need to do that. And the biggest qualifier has nothing to do with education, but you have to accept the fact that you've got to trust people, that they're going to make their own decisions, and you need to have your own life in order. The old expression is, it's impossible to love someone unless you love yourself. And that rule definitely applies if you want to be in this field of professionalism. Next question. What are the benefits of an overnight therapy retreat? The benefits are huge, mainly in the areas of couple therapy. We have what we call our encounter couple retreats. And we go away for 2 days, 1 night, and people say, well, why would you do that? Why would you go and have to take somebody out of the area? The reason why is you want to remove all of the distractions. And we usually use these encounter therapy sessions with 2 or 3 couples because they'll bond to each other. They usually have, if they're in the same state of the marriage, has nothing to do with physical age, where they have the same type of problems, and they start helping themselves. It's an awesome thing to see. So what you do is you go on those therapies. I immediately take your cell phone. We go ahead and we let people know if they have emergencies, what hotel we're staying at. You make sure you have your child care needs taken care of, because when you come into those type of therapy sessions, which is as an encounter retreat, I need to have 100% of your mind, your heart, your spirit. I need to just have your total attention. Because if you go in there to point a finger of blame, you won't make it through those sessions. This is a time when you open up your heart and you open up your feelings, and most of the time, I'm mentioning probably 9 out of 10 times, your marriage or your relationship comes out a lot stronger. Now, it's important to understand that in Encounters Couples Retreat, don't wait till you got all these major problems. When you start noticing that you're not talking to each other, that you're starting to give the dirty stares that all of us know how to do, and if you're ignoring the other person, you start losing, they won't even care what they, that's when you get involved. Don't come into those retreats with 5 or 6 major problems and think that in 2 days I'm going to help cure you. It doesn't work that way. It's preventative maintenance. As I always say to my folks that I work with and my staff members, when you have a car, you know that you've got to go and do your oil change every 3,000 or 4,000 miles. And you'll spend the 30 or 40 or 50 bucks for an oil change to preserve a car that's worth $20,000. And yet with our relationships, you're not willing to invest time and money into it? That's a hard question to answer for somebody, isn't it? Invest the money and the time. It's worthwhile. Next question. What can therapy accomplish in the form of professional help? Professional therapy, professional help really means that you have somebody who's invested but is not going to judge you. That's really important. It gives you somebody who either through their professional skills, through the level of education they have, and or the experience they have in dealing with problems, that they most likely have heard of the problem you're going to discuss with them, and they have a better idea about what type of solutions you could face. Because for you, it may be unique, but if you get a good therapist or a good counselor or doctor, they've probably heard the problems many times. But the most important thing you get is you get a interested third party that is not going to judge you, that is going to give you suggestions. And then you can discuss that with somebody. They're not there to judge you. You don't come into this session with predetermined thoughts. You just open your heart and soul up and you share with that therapist. And it takes a while to get that trust and respect. You share with that therapist and realize they're on your team. And they're on your team to have a better life. And that's what this is all about. Next question. How can I tell if therapy is working? Real simple answer for that. Probably be the shortest answer I give you. Is everybody communicating? Do you find the therapist talking most of the time? If the therapist is talking most of the time, and if the therapist is being a referee, then no, it's not working. You're wasting your time. And that doesn't bode poorly on the professional that's helping you, and it doesn't bode poorly on yourself. There's just not that link that communications. I'm a touchy-feely type of therapist. I mean, I'm going to give you a hug. I'll probably give you a kiss, whether you're a guy or a gal or not. I have to link with you so that you know I'm part of the solution. And that's how I operate. Other professionals, they take a different approach. They'll sit back a little bit. There'll be no physical touching. They'll just listen to what you have to say, and they spit out answers like they're a recording device. That's good. It works for some people. That's not the way I work. I want to make sure that you become a stronger and a better person to yourself and people who love you from when you leave versus when you first walk through the door. And that's how you know if the therapy works. And if you have a therapist or a counselor or a doctor who doesn't hold the same life values you have or the same views you have about life, it's better to cut it off early so that you don't waste your time and the therapist's time. And it doesn't reflect poorly, it just means you're not hooked up. It's just that simple. We're all different. Next question. How can unprofessionalism or amateur therapy be harmful? It's very harmful, and I'll tell you why. It has nothing to do necessarily with professional training, but if you go to someone who has a lot of problems, either in their relationship, with their kids, with drug abuse, and you go ahead and you share that with that particular person, they're going to take you through a communication stage where they're reliving their own life. And we're all unique creatures. You know, it's fascinating that no one has the same fingerprint. It's fascinating how DNA works nowadays, not only in criminal cases, but in tracing our heritage. And you look at all the businesses that have cropped up that are dealing on DNA and knowing who your previous forebears were as far as your family tree. But when you go to someone who is an amateur, who does not have the training, and who's not well versed as far as their own life, and you ask for help, the only way I can label that is you're looking for sympathy. And the sad part about it is, if you're looking for sympathy, you're not looking for solutions. You're just trying to feel better. That's not good enough. In couples therapy, do both partners need to go and participate? People have different approaches, so I'm going to give you the Dr. Ralph way of approaching this. First of all, do both people need to participate and be involved? Absolutely. But you bring that in later in the stages of your therapy or your sessions. The first thing that I do, I sit down separately with this, say, the male figure or the female figure, and we do, all the relationships. So it doesn't matter your sexuality. But we'll sit down with both partners separately and say, look, what do you need to achieve out of this therapy sessions that we're going to do? What are your goals? What are your objectives you're going to do? And then we'll write those down. And again, people tend to be more free about their explanation and their honesty when the other partner is not sitting in the same room. We have that partner sitting in the lobby wondering about what that guy is saying or gal is saying. Second piece, what have you done to try to accomplish these goals? And that literally is a session where people can whine and complain a little bit and relieve that stress or relieve the stress of defending himself. And you write all that down. You put it on big pieces of paper, but you don't show it until the next person comes through afterwards. And the third piece, how committed are you on this? Are you really serious about solving these problems, or are you trying to use me as a professional to be an ally? And that's what we refer to as accountability. We've got to have accountability because things go on and on and on. You listen to a lot of professional folks that are major celebrities, and they talk about, I've gone to the same psychologist or psychiatrist for 5 years and whatever. That's not therapy. That's reinforcement. I'm trying to convince this therapist to reinforce you that your behavior is correct. I'm not into that. Now, you might ask yourself, well, then what happens next? After they leave, I ask them to go out in the lobby, and I actually walk out to the lobby with them, either in our office or where we're holding the sessions at, and I do not let them discuss anything we talked about. I walk out physically, and I bring their partner in, and I'll see something like just to kind of get them to relax. I'll say, well, do you see any blood? Do you see any bruises? And they'll laugh and relax and say, good, now it's your turn. And I run through the same exercise again. And I go ahead and repeat the same process. When they come back for the second visit, I ask them both, I say, we're going to begin our joint visits. I want you to list the 3 problems. I like doing everything in threes. I want you to list the 3 problems that you feel are most important. You cannot show it to your partner. I want you to write it down, put it in a sealed envelope, and each of you do that. And then I open it up. It's like the newlywed game when you try to compare the different partners and see if they have the same views or the same answers. And if you find out they have the same answers, my job becomes a lot easier. But if they don't have the same answers, we address those first. And we do work on those individually, each session, one subject. And then when we exhaust those, then I bring their charts up and I actually list them on the board, and I list the common parallels they have and potential solutions. And then we go into just discussing solutions. We don't have them come in and defend why they listed the item, have a wife or a husband say, I don't agree with that, I don't treat you that way. That's a referee thing. And I'm not a referee. I don't think I can find a referee shirt big enough anyway. So what I do is say, we're not here to defend, we're not here to blame, we're into solutions. And I'll repeat the solution, I'll repeat the cause, and I'll go, okay, let's work together and find out a solution that will work for both of you. And as we work that list down and that sheet has all been exhausted, I tell them, okay, now it's time to take on the world. And I hold them accountable. And then I ask them to check in 30 days later to make sure it's working. That's how you operate. How has therapy developed over the recent years? One big development I've been practicing since 1991 is the fact that a lot more folks, including ourselves at Jenny Marie, but a lot more folks are a lot more dependent on tests and profiles and psychological testing, as we call it. In the early days, it used to be all talk therapy. We used to go ahead and just do talk therapy. Hey, what's your problem? And yeah, we had couches back in those days, and then finally we evolved into recliners. We want to make sure they feel very comfortable, very relaxed. They're not threatened. Usually there's not a clock in the session room because people look at the clock and think about what they have to do. So it's a lot like going to a casino. When you go to a casino, you don't see many clocks. There's a reason for that. So we go ahead and we do that. Now, as it evolved in the early 2000s, there have been different segments of our business that have changed. Sigmund Freud is basically the founder of a lot of things that are involved with psychology and psychiatry. I can tell you if you use Sigmund Freud's theories now, you would lose your license because they don't apply today. The world has changed. So basically the way it works is, and now in the early 2000s, we started doing assessments and evaluations. We required them, and then we started doing a lot more exercises. And now as we've moved into the year 2016, I have literally moved away from counseling. And by counseling, I mean where I sit down, say what's the problem. I do education. We give them educational tools and that provide them answers to some of the challenges, whether it be addictions, couples relationships, raising children, parenting couples. We actually give them an education where we do parenting workshops, we do projects, we do workbooks, and you get tested. And the reason why you get tested, we want to make sure you understand the concept. That is a total change in focus that we actually started in 2010. And our relapse rate, which used to be in general counseling, around 30 to 35%, whether it be addictions, behavior, domestic violence, it's dropped below 3% because you quickly learn the tools that are necessary to have a better life. And it's a lot easier remembering those tools than it is to remember that feel-good therapy when Dr. Ralph put his arm around you and said, don't worry, things will get better. That's the major difference. The next question. Freud said the only race in therapy is the Irish. Tell the truth. I'm laughing through this question, but it's true. You know, one of the things that's so important in therapy, and I'm going to take a different twist on that. I'm sorry I laughed during that question, but it's somewhat humorous. Truth. And whether it's the Irish way of doing things or whoever's way of doing things, the truth will always solve a problem. And the reason why it does, and see, Freud talked about this briefly in some of his different theses that he prepared. But the truth is easy for three reasons. Number one, and most importantly, it's easy to remember, okay? A lot of people, when they tell a lot of lies, whether it be about their personal life or anything they're involved in, they have a hard time remembering the lies because it's so foreign nature. It's a foreign nature to them because if they know the truth, they have the same feeling, so it's the truth. Number two, which is just as important, is making sure you are the person you're trying to be. Don't portray yourself as a fake person. I always say to people that if you come into therapy and you have this idea of what you're supposed to be, strong and tough, and men don't cry, and you don't get emotional, and you gotta have control, you are wasting my time, your partner's time, and probably more important, your time. This is not a debate. We don't score points. We're here to help the solution. So that is really important. And another part that Sigmund Freud definitely had is the therapy that can you do what you're asked to do? When he says, can you do what he asked you to do? You've got to come up with solutions that feel comfortable to you, and the honesty and the respect and the trust will build. So you've got to go in there with an attitude that you can solve this problem. If you have deniability where you're blaming everybody else, and if you want to play the victim, you're never going to solve a problem. So if you follow those basic 3 principles, then you're going to have a successful outcome. And if you don't, you go back in and get another oil change like we talked earlier. All right, yet another question. Why do some people have problems with therapy? It's all in one word: control. People who have difficulties in therapy, whether it's traditional counseling or it's education, the problem they have is control. When you have a personality, and it applies males and females, and I give therapy to all genders. I've worked with transgenders folks. I've worked with people of the same sex. It doesn't matter your sexuality or even your political beliefs in life. It's usually a case in relationships where there's one controlling personality and there's one submissive personality. And you know, folks, if everybody's comfortable with that in a relationship, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with being submissive, and there's nothing wrong with being controlling, as long as it's good for both people. It's like in business school. If you think back to the business days when you went through business courses, one of the first lessons they teach you is cutting the big deal and being a big success, like let's say a Donald Trump, is not good if the deal's not good for both people. As soon as one person's getting more benefit than the other, that so-called good deal is a bad deal. Human relationships are the same way. If you've got a very strong and assertive partner, and you're strong and assertive, you need to assume right from the beginning you're going to need to find some common areas that you can be comfortable with, both you and your partner. Because it is impossible literally to make a controlling person submissive unless they want to be submissive to make you happy. And sooner or later, day after day of not leaving the toilet seat down and leaving your underwear on the floor and not hitting the laundry basket or letting the trash build up, sooner or later that submissive person is going to explode. And then you're going to say as the controlling person, what in the hell's wrong with you? Well, what in the hell's wrong with you is they decided they want to be their own person. So the way you solve that problem is you've got to go into a successful therapy session realizing you're giving up control. You're not the boss. You don't have all the answers. You're here to get answers. And if you will give your therapist, your counselor, your doctor that type of leverage, they can go and help you. If you don't, you're wasting your time. Next question. Why are the benefits of group therapy versus one-on-one therapy? What's the benefits? Well, first of all, let's assume that group therapy is beneficial. In some areas it is, in some areas it is not. But let's go ahead and explore both of those. Group therapy is very important when you have people together that have the same like desires, have the same problems, and they're looking for answers, and they want to hear people's experiences. This is why organizations like AA and NA are somewhat successful, because they bring a group of people together that have the same challenges, the same problems, and they want to hear the answers, and they want to basically admit if they're an alcoholic or if they're a narcotic user, which we refer to as an addict. And when they get past that stage of deniability, they listen, they learn. And the reason why they get rewarded with different coins and different awards is you want to measure your progress. You want to be able to reach out and see you're progressing. Those ideas in therapy, whether it be addiction, group counseling on marriages, relationships, all those helpful. Parenting is excellent, especially for new parents. A lot of times we bring grandparents in who've already gone through all these challenges of raising kids, and their advice is better than anybody who ever had a PhD. Where is one-on-one therapy important? It's very few areas, but it's very important. Number one, keeping it confidential. It's very difficult for people to share all their life scars and all the issues they've been through in front of strangers. And generally they'll just quiet up or they'll clam up. That type of therapy won't work in group, where in one-on-one it will. And number two, and this is probably just as important on the honesty of things, is people want to show emotion. And if you're doing couples counseling and you bring someone, one of the two committed partners in it, and they're in tears, they usually have an easier time showing that kind of emotion in front of a professional they would in front of all these strangers. And that is really important. So really the follow-up question of that question is you need to put this in the hands of your therapist, your counselor, your doctor, and let them hear the issues you're trying to resolve, and let them give you advice of whether it be better to go the route of group therapy or the route of one-on-one therapy. Let them give that recommendation, go home, sleep on it, have a talk about it, and then make that decision. This is not one you want to make right away. It's a very tough decision. It really is. Next question. How can I prepare for an upcoming therapy session? You prepare by what type of problem you have. And I'm going to break it into two areas, the two areas we deal with the most. Number one, the issue of substance abuse. I know you get tired of us talking about it, but literally 6 out of every 10 people walking around have a substance abuse challenge. It's not just illegal drugs, it's even prescribed drugs. So when you start figuring out how 6 out of 10 people have this challenge, you're not alone. So the way you prepare for it is, again, you prepare ahead of the counseling session or the whatever session you go to, and you list all your problems, the cause, and your solution. That's how you prepare. And especially in addictions, that's really important. And that gets the therapist a general idea in a quick shot analysis of the challenges you're facing. It's going to save you a lot of money because then the therapist or the counselor or the doctor hasn't spent 3 sessions trying to figure out what's going on, okay? The other way you prepare is you prepare in lowering your expectations. You've got to look at yourself, whether it's a relationship problem or if it's an addiction problem. You look at it and say, look, it took me 5, 6, 7 years. I had a bad upbringing in my family. It took that long to finally seek help. Don't expect your therapist, your counselor, your doctor to have a solution like taking an aspirin and all of a sudden the headache goes away. It doesn't work that way. It's going to be a long, drawn-out process where you're not going to get the wins that you want right away. You're going to have small victories. And when you're done, and you'll know when you're done, and the therapist will, you have a better life. It is better to go ahead and admit the concerns you have, the challenges you have, the flaws you have, and figure out how I want to make my life better. Then all of a sudden grow up and be old and be bitter and think, boy, if only I had thought about these problems and get it resolved at 40 instead of 60, what kind of life have I lost? 20 years I've lost, especially in relationships. Why give up 20 years? Because when someone leaves and they do that express upstairs, it's too late. So nip it in the bud while you can and get those understandings out where you can handle them. All right, it's time for us to take a quick break. I hope you like this Ask the Doctor part of our program. It's one that I really enjoy. And once again, in our closing billboards, you'll be able to see our website, our email address, and we'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have. All these questions that I answered today, the people preferred not to be mentioned as far as name and city. And you have that right. You don't have to do that. But if you want to go ahead and list your name and city, and you want to leave your phone number, that makes it a little easier for me. But in this particular case, everybody just wanted to hear the solutions or hear the proposal rather than have it tracked back to them. So take care of one another, and we'll be right back after this break. Welcome back from that short break. There's a couple of messages I want you to remember before we close our program today. Number one, if you think you have a lot of problems, think about all those problems that were actually sent to us by email and realize that maybe your life's not as complicated or as troublesome as you might think, because a lot of folks are dealing with a lot of issues. So we encourage you to think about that a little bit and try to isolate your problems. One of the things that's so important is not only to ask the question and be open to what a person suggests to you, in this case, Dr. Ralph, but what's really important is to absorb the message. I don't want to lecture you on how the mind works, but I'll give you a brief overview. Your mind is built up of 2 major parts. Your conscious mind, which is your part of your mind that you're making decisions. You're trying to decide if you're going to stop at that yellow light instead of waiting for the red light. You go into a restaurant, you want to choose something to eat. The kid's got a problem and that they fell on their bike, and you want to dress the wound and try to reassure them that they can ride a bike. Those things are all what we call conscious mind decisions. And those usually come pretty automatic based on your background, your training, and your value systems. The ones that are complicated are the subconscious questions. And if you can picture this in your life, is that a conscious mind is like a pass-through filter. Again, the example that we like to use about a car. If you had an oil change and you never changed the oil filter, you're wasting your time. You're pouring new fluid in that's going to get all gunked up with all the residue that's left in your motor or on your filter. So life is a lot like that. You've got to replace that oil filter in the car, put a brand new oil filter so the fluids can drain through and collect the deposits that you don't want to damage your engine. Life's the same way. You need to every once in a while take the time and stop and go ahead and replace the filter. And that's what this Ask the Dr. Ralph segment's about, is asking those questions and getting answers. And if they don't work and you need further explanation, that's why we leave the phone numbers at the end of the show. But here's the most important thing. I want you to do something for me. And this is what I want. And as you know, watching Life's Journey, we always have a little trivia question or some question where we take it in, we pick a winner, we give you this great prize, and hopefully get you on camera. So here's what I want you to do for me. I want you in your life, and I don't care whether you're a 12-year-old young lady, you're a 16-year-old boy who plays football on some football team and you're a big star, or if you're a grandma sitting there with 72 years of age, you just lost the love of your life and you're trying to figure out, how am I going to survive going forward in life until the Lord calls me? I don't care what point of life you come through, but I want you to share something with me, and we'll make it the trivia question. I want you to pick the most difficult, toughest problem, even if you haven't solved it, that you've had to face. I mean, the type of problem that you go to bed at night and you can't sleep because you're thinking about this problem. We've all been there. And I want you to write that problem down, and then I want you to write down how you solved it. And whoever comes up with the best one, and I mean the best one by the intensity of the problem, how they approach the solution, you're going to be a winner. You're going to walk away with some nice prizes. So take the time, think about that, and write that down. Now, the other step of this, maybe you don't care about the prizes and you don't want to have your lovely face on our camera. That's okay too. But then give me that same exercise, but give it to me explaining the problem, what perhaps caused the problem, and how you're at your wit's end trying to figure out how to solve it. And this is a dilemma that's constantly hitting you. And when you do that, you might not win a prize, but it sure would be helpful to me, because then I can reach out and help you. Why is that so important? When people make reactionary decisions, and I'm not talking about stopping for a red light or deciding whether you want to order a hamburger or a cheeseburger, I'm not talking about that. But when people make life choices on a reactionary basis where you just hear it, you want to do it, and you just do it, your chance of success is 25%. That's all it is, 25%. But if you would take that same problem, refer it or table it, as we say in the business world, think about it, write down the pros and cons of your solution, and then make your choice based off the pros and cons that's on the list. In other words, for those folks out there, if you want to take it more on a personal basis, what risk you have in making a decision and what benefits you'd have in making the decision. If you take that element with a little bit of professional help, your success ratio goes up to 85%. And the other 15% where you don't become successful is either you don't understand the problem or, quite frankly, you didn't tell the truth. So if you have a choice between taking the pro and con or take the reactionary decision, always go with the pro and con. And if you want to know how to release these problems from you so you don't have nightmares and dreams, which they are caused by your subconscious, clean up the problem. If you're dealing with a lot of stressful issues and that's being absorbed in your subconscious, because it'll pass right through your conscious mind because you haven't solved it. Identify those, get them resolved, and you start cleaning up that subconscious. And if you don't want to do it that way, then you might want to go and have a hypnotic stage. I laugh only because I've had people go with hypnosis, and a lot of psychologists, they do learn that art of hypnosis. And that is another way to clean your filter. But the only problem with cleaning your filter that way, you don't resolve it, it comes back again. But who knows? It's at least a lot of fun to listen to it. On behalf of Jenny Marie Wellness Centers, we sure appreciate the fact that you've tuned in and watched the program. We're here to help you. We're here to help you get a better life, and that's our whole purpose. So be sure to take care of one another and yourself, and God bless. We'll talk to you next week.